Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the faith, to yet another one of my blogs. Yes, this is year 2, blog 7, or in legacy numbers, blog 59, and today it is the 9th of April 2013, and that means it's Easter. So, happy Easter to you all, and I hope you're going to have a nice weekend. Not quite sure what you do at Easter. I know that through many sectors of my years, Easter has been something to look forward to. It's, for many reasons, such as if I was at work, it'd be the time off. If it was in my younger years, it was the Easter eggs I was going to get. And I suppose when you get through the years, religion, because it is a religious event, really, it takes a different meaning. When my father died, I questioned religion big time. It hasn't really settled down for me. It's just more confused me more than anything. But hey, just to say, this week has been a different type of week. I've tried to do some more output. I've tried to interact more with you guys, and I've also tried to be there for my mother, do things for work, and sort of just try and get the house in order. And I've had moderate success with it all. But that's really a little bit later on. I might talk a little bit more about that. But we always start off with the news, don't we? So we won't change that. This is just to date stamp this blog, so that when my family look back at this, they can see what was going on in the news. It might spark a memory for them, and then they can sort of see whether my demeanour has changed based on how things in the world have changed. Plus, of course, my own personal responses, which I usually do at the end. So, the war. Okay. And I read this off of my notes, so if I do look down, apologies. But the war. French President Macron urged China's Xi Jinping to bring Russia back to reason over the war in the first of a series of high-end meetings. Hours later, a Russia spokesman said he saw no prospect of China mediating in peace talks, and Russia will continue with its attacks. Terrible, really, to hear such a response from Russia with that. It seems to indicate to me, we don't care who you throw into the mix. You could bring in bibliomatic religious figures into this, and we don't care. We'll continue to move forward. It's very much that type of a brash statement. But I do applaud France and the other European countries trying to have high-end meetings with other countries outside of this to see whether they can intervene and try and bring things back to the table, because we've got two outputs for this, and that is really that the high-end meetings go ahead and peace is negotiated, or all-out war until one surrenders. And you just hope that the talks is the way we go. In the news, cancer, yes. Vaccines for cancer and heart disease will be ready by the end of the decade, i.e. 2030. A pharmaceutical firm have developed a set of vaccines. 15 years of development has been unspooled in the last 18 months, but requires constant funding to meet the target. Now, I put that in because that's great news. Now, if a pharmaceutical company, and it didn't mention which one, but if it's one of the major ones, comes out and says, we've been developing some vaccines for the last 15 years, we've been testing him, and in the last 18 months the tests have been positive, and we will now come out with a statement that says by 2030, fingers crossed, and with constant funding, we'll have some vaccines. Then it opens my eyes. I think the adverts and the news articles have all stated that 1 in 2 of us will experience cancer in our lifetime. That's a half. So, there have been friends of my family that have died of cancer. I've had people in my family that have died of cancer. Fingers crossed for me. Fingers crossed for the rest of my close family. But if this also does heart disease as well and is a legit statement, then I'm quite excited, because 2030 is not that far away. So after that, we've got an Easter statement here. This made me smile. Pets at Home, which is a chain of shops in England. Pets at Home have paused sales of rabbits at all 457 stores over Easter to stop impulse buys by family. Yes, I think we've seen this type of statement before from about dogs and cats at Christmas, where we buy them and then they grow too large for us, or they don't think twice, and all of a sudden you've got cats abandoned in the streets and so forth. And I dare say, with Easter coming along and you've done your Easter egg stuff, some children are going to be saying, can we have a rabbit, can we have a rabbit? And there you go. And it really is an impulse buy. When you're buying something that's living, it's a commitment. And we all know how pressure can be put onto us, especially if we're adults and parents, to be the happy, laughy parent that gives their wish to their children. But yeah, that's a statement from me on that one, and I think we can all agree on aspects of that. And then in the news, apparently the Good Friday Agreement turned 25 years yesterday. So there were many articles marking this event. Yes, so I was doing all of my news catch-up, as I do, on Saturday, and all I could see was the Good Friday Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, and it was all mentioning about how it could all unravel with Brexit, and it brought back a lot of news articles that I'm sure people that are writing these articles had great amount of respect for, and of course paid them an awful lot of money to recap over something that's been with us for 25 years. So I don't really have any thoughts about the Good Friday Agreement other than ending the hostility, the IRA, and all of that sort of stuff was something that I tried to understand back then and have a greater appreciation of it now. But gone away? No. And that's just my opinion, really, on that. And that brings the end to the news. Not doing too badly so far. Quite happy with this. Okay, so now we get to the good stuff. The stuff that I think that you guys look out for, and that is the shout-outs, the questions, and all of that sort of stuff. So big thank yous to everybody that's left a comment, left a question, and has tried to make my week a happier place. As most of you know, I'm by myself. I do have my mother, but having a conversation at my level with your mother in a later years is quite difficult. She doesn't understand the TV I like, the games I like. That's where you guys all come in. So let's get out these shout outs, shall I? So in no particular order, thanks go to Colin Jones, Milfy Swinbuckle, Jambon, Magda K, David Retro Gaming Played Badly, Martroid, Down the Rabbit Hole, Denny, Stevie Paperboy, Pondo's Retro Goodness, Doug Scullery, Mainmeister, and Del Gilchrist. And like I say, thanks very much for all of those. And the only thing that I can really say about it, and this is no criticism, and it's something that I'll address later on, the numbers are diminishing, and I've noticed it. And although I've mentioned before, it's not about the subscribers, and many of my friends bring out videos and they all say the same thing, not about the subscribers. We have to understand that each person's video content is not the same. Just to give some examples, some of my friends just do video playback of them playing games, or playing games as a history sort of aspect, and others do mini blogs and hardware reviews, etc. A blog, of which this is a derivative of one, is basically a diary, and it relies on me talking about topics, and it relies about things happening during the week. If you've ever started a diary, you'll notice that right at the beginning you write lots, and then as you go further into the months, those lots turn into one line that said nothing happened this week, nothing happened this week. Because numbers don't mean anything as long as there is a core that keep watching and commenting, it doesn't really matter. But as the shout outs become less, it means I'm getting less questions. If there are less questions, it relies on me to come out with topics. And this is, my blog is always going to be here because it's going to be for my family. But the hours of preparation that I do to fill in things would be far less if I made this diary private. And that meant that a 2-hour recording would remain the same, but the research that I do, the what's happening in the news, answering questions, severely diminish, and therefore the blog would become a diary. So I do notice a distinction between blog and diary. So mine is a hybrid of that. I thank you all for being there, and at the moment I've got lots and lots of topics. But what I'm going to do shortly is I'm going to bring out a questionnaire to find out from you guys what bits you like about the blog and what bits you don't. And if I can change things around a little bit, then I'll do so, because I want this to be entertaining for you guys. If it's not entertaining, you switch off. If there's something in my blog that doesn't raise a spark or a question, then that's the reason why you don't comment. If there is no comments and I don't have a topic, then the blog dies. So I'm hoping that maybe shortening bits that people don't like, or cutting it out completely, encourages more stuff that you'll have a discussion with me about, that will then keep the blog alive. Maybe that's a good thing. So I'm not looking negatively at this. I'm not saying that things are going to end. I'm just saying that I've made huge change for year 2, and I've added things, different camera angles, media sections, topics that I hoped would expand and make things fun, but I've noticed actually the comments go down, and we all know what will happen if the comments go down to a point where it really isn't worth all that research to do for it, and therefore becomes something that is much easier to do private. So we won't look at the doldrums, just a little reason why I agree that subs don't matter, but a blog will survive only based on the sparks of information that makes you guys talk, and I need to know what you guys are talking about. So there we go. So we'll do the questions now, and as you know, I love the questions bit. It makes me think, makes me do all sorts of stuff, in regards to prep. Um, I tend to only prep when I see a comment that's like will take 5 minutes to read, right? If it's something that's just a couple of lines, I just go, great, I've got a question, and I move on. So some of these I've read, but those are from the people that I know write long blogs comments to me. The ones that are short, first time reading them. So, no particular order. The first one that comes up is Doug Scullery. Thank you, Doug, for writing a comment and some questions. Right, okay. Here's a couple of topics for you. Back in the day, did you ever enter any gaming competitions? For example, the Pieman game or anything like that? Oh my god. No, I did enter lots of competitions, but they were at school. I did a designer kitchen competition, all of that sort of stuff. Game competitions. I don't think I did, There's obviously big ones that some people will remember and some people won't. If I mention the word, the game Cockatony Wilf, I think many people will remember there was a competition with that. I attempted that, but as soon as I played it and saw what the game was, and it wasn't really my type of game, I decided, no, getting to the end of this game, I'm not going to be one of the first 500 or 600 or 1,000 that's required to win this competition. And I've read all sorts of competitions that Atari did back in the day. There was a Dungeons and Dragons or strategy, dungeon crawler type one, which was a series that had a prize at the end of each game that made up a set of gold trophies. There was a crown, a scepter, a coin, I think, and in the end, I think that competition said that they tried to contact the people that won the competitions, and they never either received them, or a statement came out to say that they melted the trophies down back into their relevant elements, gold, the jewels, separate segments. So I don't know. I can't really think of many other competitions. So you've got me on that one, but I do remember I attempted Cockatony Wilf and just basically went, nah, not for me. Then again, I've tried to be competitive, but I've tended to find I've been more daring later on than I was early on. Early on, I was very timid, didn't push myself enough. So competitions turned into something that I didn't really enter too much. Number 2, what are your thoughts on modern competitive gaming where players can earn big money? A friend of mine has a son who's 15 and is part of a professional team that makes tens of thousands per year playing Fortnite. Crazy stuff. And I agree with you, yeah, crazy stuff. What do I think about modern competitive gaming? Now, the last time I thought about modern competitive gaming was where there were talks that they were taking some Olympic events that have been around for years away and bringing video games in. And I thought, no, this isn't right. If you're going to have the spirit of the Olympics, I don't think a video game matches that. Although there are many, many good things in games that increase reaction time, make you think, and think fast. I don't think it's an Olympic event like I know it. The javelin, the discus, the decathlon, running, high jump, even things like fencing, judo, all of those sort of things. Those, boxing, those are Olympic events in my eyes. And maybe it's because I'm the wrong person to ask on that, because the Olympics do need to adapt, and video games is a medium for them to adapt into. But no, I don't think I'll ever, in my lifetime, think of video games as being an Olympic event. Um, the positives, though, are you're part of a team. You work as a team. Um, if one person fails, the whole team fails. Um, the camaraderie of it all, I think that's all great at the age of 15, that you're part of that. But the pressures, because there is money involved, when money starts to come into it, greed comes in. The competitiveness turns into an all-encompassing feeling over the whole team. The pressure can basically, for some people, be so much that you can collapse or have nervous breakdowns and so forth. I think in the right context, video team game playing is great, but I think it's heading in. I mean, it isn't heading into the dirty area. It's been there and shown its ugly head. It's just, what I'm trying to say is there are many light aspects to it, but there are many dark, and you have to be wary of the dark. If this starts to become something that takes you away from your studies, takes you away from what you do on a regular basis, because you think it will become your job, and it's a job that you're going to be able to maintain to the point where you think you can retire, that's where I start to have second guess and doubts on. So I'm hoping that's a good enough answer for you, because it really is a toss on whether I think it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's good and bad, and some of it scares me. For the youngsters, I mean. So thanks very much for that, Doug. Salute. And we move to Denny. Good old Denny. He writes essays, and I love him for it, because it means I've got something to read, means it got stuff that's that I need to think about, and if I read out certain segments of it might encourage you to read it yourself, because he answers your questions as well. In fact, he could probably do his own blog. But here we go. Hey Del, so late this week with my comments. Very, very busy week. Better late than never. I can't stand April Fools. The thing is so threadbare these days, I just roll my eyes when folks do it. Yeah, we were talking about, because it was April Fool's Day last Saturday, and I was wondering whether anybody got caught out. As before, no need to apologise. Extremely understandable due to your health conditions. I understand where you're coming from with blood pressure. Yes, 2 weeks or so ago, I had an event during a blog. I apologised for it, and it's nice that people think I don't need to apologise for it. I hope it opened the eyes to some of my friends that don't know what I've been talking about, because sometimes it's hard to envisage. We can all envisage somebody having a fit on the floor because they've got some sort of problem, that's caused by strobe effects or whatever, or epilepsy and all of that sort of stuff. But the things I've been discussing about have been things that you could take singularly, but it could be a combination of things that's causing my problem. The jury's out on that, and all I'm trying to do is get back to normal. So I'm glad I worked my way through those problems that week, but I still thought an apology was required. A bird table is like the film Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I know Kevin Costner's going to have a look at my bird table. Animals are greedy by nature, as are birds. Yeah, they are, and I tell you what, it's encouraged a few more animals in. My cameras that are not IP cameras, for which I've got something called a trail cam, which records at night and day, and it has a solar panel on it. That's picked up hedgehogs. So I've put out old pizza from 2 days ago, that never got eaten, and microwaving them would make them taste disgusting. And I've put them on the ground. The next day, I've seen the little hedgehogs come out and start eating that. And The funny thing about that is, after a couple of days of watching that in film footage, cats started to come into our garden and play with the hedgehogs. And when I mean play, I suppose attack. But hedgehogs are very protective beasts, and they roll themselves up into a little ball. And these are kittens. You could see by the size of them that they weren't adult cats. And everything I saw lasted a couple of minutes before they gave up the ghost and decided to go somewhere else. So that's quite nice to see. But nature's lovely, and as much as my proper Canon cameras with telephoto lens can pick up some lovely images of birds, it's very nice that I've got video footage that I can do a snapshot of and give to my mother, because she loves robins and blue tits and all of that sort of stuff. The news. So he's mentioned his aspects on the news, so we won't cover that because I think we've all got our own opinions on the news. Shout outs, questions. Thanks a million for answering my question, mate. But as for Formula One, no. My folks drive, no pun intended, me crazy with it. I can understand that. My mum's got a similar aspect. Why are they just riding around and around in vehicles? It must be really boring, etc., etc. You have to be. I think there's a history in it, and if you're into the history of it, you'll become a fan of it, even though it's nothing like it was in the past. I'm in total agreement regarding Jeff Minter and the VIC-20. That seemed to be the Commodore machine that suited him best. Other games that pushed the VIC-20 were Jelly Monsters, Omega Race, and Sword of Fergal. Oh, shouldn't have mentioned all these titles. I might do my 8-bit years. Oh, no, seriously, thanks for mentioning those. Actually, all of those I did have. Played them to death as well, because being a younger person, I put in a cartridge and I would play it for the day. It weren't like half hour here, 10 minutes here, all of that sort of stuff. It would be proper couple of hours, playing just one game, regardless of how we perceive it now, which would be simplistic and boring and let's move on. I love the old games. I think they're great. Steve, so he's got a comment for Steve. Steve, yes, great points on Blake 7. As for his question, I have to say that two that put the hairs on the back of my neck were Armchair Thriller, the Black Nun episode, and the film has to be Salem's Lot, followed by Alien, and as you say, Del, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yes, so we were talking about things that scared you as a TV program and a film. And he's got some crackers there. Armchair Thriller is one that you guys might not... Well, you might know it. Might not remember too much, but I remember it. It was a half-hour anthology show, a little bit like Tales of the Unexpected, telling a story with a macabre, supernatural type ending to it. Twilight Zone will always be the series that I turn to for that type of anthology show. I could repeat another one that's very, very rarely mentioned. There was a show which British Sky Broadcasting, before Sky bought them up, used a show called Monsters. And it was a Monster of the Week type show. The makeup was terrible. It was a half-hour show, but it was very much an Amazing Stories or Twilight Zone type thing. And the monsters was more the natural, and the humans were more the unnatural. So it starts off, and I can remember the title sequence quite well, with a bunch of creatures like Cyclops and Medusas sitting on a couch, sitting to watch their favourite programme called Monsters, and you can imagine the monsters to them are the humans. Brilliant show. Didn't last very long. Very hit and miss in quality. A joy to watch back then. It won't have aged well, and it's something that I've only returned to once, I think, in the last 10 years. So, might be one that bring back for me. So, your videos, please, Del, keep the 8-bit videos coming. The VIC-20 stuff is really welcome. Mountain King and K-Star Patrol and the C64 game Forbidden Forest that I bought back in the day. Brilliant. I'll try to do my best to keep you entertained, Denny, with those. They entertain me because the reason I do them is that I'm remembering something and wondering whether you guys watch them as well. More so on the VIC-20 because I think that's a machine that a lot of people, even if you put on a game as what I consider to be as well known as Wacky Waiters, will be a blind game to so many other people, depending on your age. So, maybe Wacky Waiters will be the next one. Who knows? Question, which leads me to my question. What sort of comedy do you like? Physical, stand-up, mix of both? And who were your heroes? Oh, wow. Now, I could be here forever, Denny, but I'll try and keep it short. I love physical and stand-up comedy. I remember in the early days coming home from primary school and they'd be showing Harold Lloyd and Laurel and Hardy clips. They made them into a TV series, bringing back their theatre work that used to be in the cinemas in the 20s and 30s to us in the 70s. And they were fantastic. And it was so slapstick. It was great. I don't remember ever going out and kicking someone up the arse to see whether they find it funny. So I must have understood the difference between funny and something that you shouldn't be doing. Stand-up's great because I remember watching all of those 80s stand-ups with Robin Williams. I suppose I could mention some others. Let me see. For goodness sake. See, this is where I don't want to go too off in a tangent here, but the stand-up comedy was important to me, the American ones, more than Eddie Murphy. There you are. That was what I was trying to think of. And they were important to me because they brought in stories with a comical end. So again, something that I grew to appreciate and love. And then you say a mix of both, and who were your heroes? So, I mean, Steve Martin is a hero of mine from an American point of view. From a British point of view, I used to love all the monologues for some of the comedians that turned into TV shows. Les Dawson did monologues, as did Frankie Howard. Morecambe and Wise always did their introduction to their show before doing their sketches. So many heroes of mine. And, we all know that we've got comedy giants like Sid James, most of the Carry On team. We could say at some point, even in there, looking at them individually were funny, rather than being an ensemble. And then, of course, you've got double acts. Morecambe and Wise have mentioned, Cannon and Ball. Less so like Little and Large. But they make up your childhood, and they bring so much joy because they entertained in different areas. So there would be the monologue, the skit, bringing the audience in, bringing other actors into their world. So I'm going to say a little bit of everything, because even when it comes to someone like Frankie Howard, who I loved because of Up Pompeii and all of the criteria of comedy, because he did more than just Up Pompeii. His skits and his monologues and him being on game shows entertained me for years and years and years, because he had a type of humour that was quite dry and audience participation. He had these little quirks, Mrs. Titty Ye Not, all of that sort of stuff, and then he'd be interrupted and go, "So what was I saying? Oh, yes, I remember now." And yeah, don't you, missus, and all of this sort of stuff, and he'd get to it. In fact, I should try and do that rather than keep going at everything. Very conscious that I do that still, even now. Thanks very much, Denny. Like I say, I hope that wasn't too short, and I hope it wasn't too long for other people, and I know I rambled a bit. I tried to clear my mind and then focus. It's very difficult sometimes, especially with things going around. You wouldn't believe what's going on in my garden at the moment. So thank you so much, Denny. Salute to you. And we move to Colin. Well, we know Colin, bullet points everything, has his own channel, great guy, very technically minded, pushes me to do better, to think faster. Do you know what I mean? So Colin said, yes, the stress was definitely up front and centre last week, but I didn't for 1 second think any alcohol was involved. Yeah, I made a joke. In fact, product placement now. Oh yeah, so much nice. Jeff did better games on the C64 than the VIC-20, but those he made first for the VIC-20 were better than the C64 ports. Sheep in Space is probably my favourite Llamasoft game of all time. Yeah, I think Denny got it the best, where I was saying that I think because the VIC-20 didn't have a lot of memory, because Jeff is very arcade orientated, I considered the VIC-20 to be his machine, because I think games work best. But there's no getting over the fact that his best work was in the Commodore 64, because like you mentioned Sheep in Space. Sheep in Space was one of the top 5 games that I asked Steve to play. So that just goes to show you how I thought that game is in my gaming years. So I wasn't trying to imply that he was better on one machine than another. It was more to do with the suitability of the machine, where I think he got more out of the confinement of having a lack of RAM, and the type of game he was doing worked better, I think 20. So games will never go away for me as being pure gems on the 64. And Cipital, brilliant. Revenge of the Mutant Camels, brilliant. Iridis Alpha, yeah, great. Mama Llama, less so, but even with that, I played that and got to grips with it. Batalix, oh, I could be here forever, Colin. I think you get the idea. There are some gems there, but I think later on, especially things like Batalix, minigames. It's almost like I'm writing for less memory, and putting them all together to make one big game. Started to do a little bit of that towards the end. You're perfectly on my wavelength for the clickability, clickbait stuff. Spot on, buddy. Yes, well, you could probably imagine that me being an IT administrator for so many years, that was going to get my goat. So I'm glad I'm on your same wavelength. I think I'm on the same wavelength for everything you do. Daft cheeky sod. Right. I'm joint admin of the Secret Cheese Society on Facebook. The joke being it's open and public. I like Dairy, especially as sandwiches. Yeah, this is where there's nothing wrong with Dairy. It's just, to me, it's just not right. My mum take it like this. My mum likes pink salmon. She gets it with vinegar and makes it into sandwiches. Lovely for my mum. I can't touch the stuff. I don't like the stuff, but I'll have salmon paste. And I'll have a salmon paste sandwich. Why? Same flavour, same texture. But I don't like salmon sandwiches, and I like salmon paste. You like Dairy Lee, which is a spreadable cheese. I like proper cheddar. And I'm sure you like cheddar as well. You're just mentioning it in your one particular type here. So it's each to their own. It's a matter of texture, taste, all sorts of things, and of what your brain's thinking at the time when you're swallowing your food down your throat. Kentucky Fried Movie. Can you imagine something like that getting a release these days? Rex Kramer, Danger Seeker. That'd be riot. Yeah, there'd be riots. Yeah, Kentucky Fried Movie. I haven't thought about that in a long time. If anybody wants to watch some mad stuff that's not Naked Gun or Airplane or any of that type of stuff, and want to see totally disjointed things put together with no core whatsoever, Kentucky Fried Movie, Amazon Women on the Moon, perfect examples of films that you'll get a blast out of, because there'll be a lot of hit and miss, but when it's a hit, you'll be remembering it for years and years and years. The core of those two films is a central movie. Okay, I think in Kentucky Fried Movie it was A Fistful of Yen, which was a homage to Enter the Dragon. In Amazon Women on the Moon, it was Amazon Women on the Moon. There's a lot of films in the 50s where people would go into space and they'd come across women all scantily clad with some sort of like Flash Gordon, Ming the Merciless villain in it. That's what's in Amazon Women in the Moon. Kentucky Fried Movie, definitely a thumbs up. For my question, I'm going to be boring and ask the same question as I asked Alan. Oh, okay. With Easter rapidly approaching and the next blog being Easter Sunday, so that's today, what are your opinions on this religious time of year? Yeah, and this is where I was saying right at the beginning. In many phases of my life, Easter has meant different things, and it should be a constant because it's a religious event. The death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Throwing in eggs and rabbits and all of this sort of stuff is neither here nor there. The church should be the thing that we're thinking about, and my aspects of the church has changed drastically since my father died. You know, I'm sure if anybody close to you has died, you question why him, why this time, what did he do to you, why are you doing this to me, why are you pushing me into this, are you even there, you're a sod, that sort of thing. And those are the 5 emotions that you go through with death, and I don't want to go through that again, and I know I've got to. And will it affect me again? Of course it will make me question things again. So I want to say that Easter I look at now as just being time off from work, relaxing, time that you can spend with your family again, which you couldn't do because of the amount of hours that you do. Getting things done that you've been putting off, and I'm sure every parent will think about this. I'm dreading Easter because I know what it means. We've got to go to B&Q and I've got to put that shelf up, because that's the that's the other thing. And if you're not inclined with DIY, it will be got to go to the garden centre, get a bag of peat, get some seeds, buy some begonias, some spring poppies, clematis, all of those sort of plants. Start mowing the lawn, and us jiggering and pottering about in the garden, trying to re-oil the motor mower or whatever. So Easter's a mix of everything, and when it comes to religion, it's become a mute point for me, because I question everything now, and I always did, because I'm very scientific and logical in my thoughts, but right now I don't have much to say about religion at all. Thanks very much, Colin. You brought back a mix of happy and sad feelings in there, and I hope I gave a good answer to you. I try to excel with answering a question for you. I really do, because week by week you push me, so thank you for that. Then we come to Milfy. Oh, well, good old Milfy, what can we say? Last week we did the scenario aspect, for which I encouraged you guys to read his scenario for yourself. He wanted a one-word answer to finish it, to show that I actually completed the whole scenario for which I did without giving the answer. Not too difficult now to mention that the word was hyena. I kept mentioning the word laugh. I did mention the cat family. That came about with the numbering system that were on the weapons. It gave you letters of the alphabet, which you could then rearrange into something that would give you the word that completes the scenario. So, if I have spoiled that for you, you did have 2 weeks. So, here we go. Questions for the next blog. We all like to whinge on about how the 90s arcades were pretty much the death of the glorious arcades. My question this week is why, or even why, were only a certain type of games being made when during the 80s we got all kinds of crazy stuff? Yeah, I think you have to look at things a little bit like comics, books, TV. We have our learning years and we have our experimental years, and I look at those early days as a sign of growth. It was like, how can we top this one? How can we top this one? How can we top that one? Right, that's now the top racer. We've got to better that for our next racer. That's the best shoot 'em up. We've got to top that best shoot 'em up. And there were so many genres that came out to a point where a certain game would come out and everybody concentrated on that, and certain stuff would just be pushed back. So the pure shoot 'em up sort of went, and run and gun came in, and then run and gun turned into 3D run and gun or light guns. The beat 'em up that used to be between two people turned into a sideways beat 'em up, to then a tournament beat up with lots and lots of moves and strategy, where even being a certain distance away from a character has meaning to the type of attack that you're going to come out with. And then linking machines came in so that you could compete on a much greater level, and then modems to those linked machines so that you could do it over countries. It goes on and on and on. But I think the death of the arcade, and the way that I see it, was the point where gimmicks or superfluous machines were dealt with that cost so much money that your arcade could never afford them, and if they did, there were queues outside them. Things like the sit-down Outrun, the sit-down, I think, Space Harrier, the sit-down Hang-On, the linked-up Daytona USA. And what happens as we're moving through the arcade years, the computer years are then moving forward. And there was a point where arcade and console, the blurriness, the lines had gone. The Dreamcast is, I think, a perfect example where the Dreamcast is actually in an arcade machine called the Naomi, was it? Yeah, something like that. And what you have to say to yourself then is, if I could play this at home, why do I need to come to an arcade? And the only reason you came to the arcade was, A, to compete with your mates and it was a place to meet up, or it was something to do while you're waiting for your bowling lane to become clear, or it's the gimmick. The gimmick being the light gun, the punch bag, the control system of a steering wheel, and accelerator pads, the linked up ability, the dance mat for Dance Revolution, I'll never forget that. And even as we started to bring those into home consoles, the light gun being a particular one that's been around for donkey's years, we have to understand that our TV stopped us playing those because we couldn't, the way that an old TV picked up the signal didn't really work. You had to develop sensor bars and all sorts of stuff. So I think the answer I've given you there is that the 80s was a series of expanse and experimentation. Street Fighter 2 and those types of games came along, and basically, because they were such cash cows, they took over. And oldish games that were singular screen just died. And they became more the thing that you'd get at home because it's easy to replicate. And the second part, why do you think that during the 90s and a bit after, the majority of game engineers died and the main games getting made were just fighting, brawl, horizontal scrolling, bullet hell type shooters and 3D racing games? Well, I think I've answered that, Milfy. Yeah, it's part of that what killed the arcade. Street Fighter 2, as good and as fantastic as it was, has a lot to answer for, as does Final Fight, as does Ridge Racer and Daytona in regards to the racing game genre. The likes of seeing Outrun, where we were pushing hardware to give you cartoony effect of 3D compared to photorealistic 3D, wasn't going to happen. And as our consoles got better, we were able to mimic it at home. So the death of the arcades is down to a number of things, but one of them is the blurry edgeness of how fast and how good a console is now compared to an arcade machine. What used to cost 15,000-20,000 to an arcade store, you could now replicate in a console that cost you £300 or £400. Yeah, shame. But saying that, the arcades are still there. We can still look at the history of those arcade games by going to special events and special museum type places that you can go and see with your friends and see what Dad used to play, I suppose is how you could look at it. So don't miss out on those because they're not going to be around forever. And MAME's wonderful, but there's nothing quite like standing in front of a machine, you against the machine with your one coin and how far you can get. MAME can never replicate that when you're at an event with other like-minded people. It really is great, and I think Colin can concur with that because he went to an arcade club last year with MAME Meister, and I think those people all being around him playing on these arcade machines, all like-minded, is a sort of a camaraderie. So now we get to so I say thank you very much, Milfy, as always. Keep that up, and I eternal thanks to you. Jambon, hi Del, thanks for another great blog and also for all the PC buying advice. Yes, I've been trying to help him with the graphic card. I still maintain that the 3060 Ti is the one to get. I'm remembering things on how I used to build PCs, remembering that I haven't built a PC since 2014, and I used to know this stuff with a click of the fingers, that wattage is very important in regards to how much power you're going to supply to that chip and that graphic card, and that the more wattage that you've got there, the more overclocking you can do, the more header room you're given. So the 3060 Ti can be pushed to 3070 levels. You save yourself £150 and you get the same output virtually nearly there. And what we've discovered by me watching these videos, and what I've discovered, is the 1060 card is now considered so old hat that if you're not on a 2060 or above, you're going to find difficulty with anything other than medium settings on some of the most basic 3D games. Now, if 3D games are not yours, don't worry about it. But and you should take all of that in tongue-in-cheek, because the 1060 is a damn good card. But I do understand things move on, and the 1060 is now, let me think, 9 years old. Yeah, 9 years of technology has moved forward, and yet you can still play modern games, but these days people now want 1080, and above monitors. They want 4K gaming. They want all of the effects, including ray tracing, added to effects. So, yeah. So, have you got a question here for me? I finally come up with a question, if you don't mind. Did you ever follow the pop music charts? And if so, what do you think the last year was where you could look and say the top 100 selling UK singles for that said year and remember virtually all of them and generally feel nostalgic about them? I think I'd have to go back to the early to mid 90s for that. There's a lot anyhow. No, thanks a lot anyhow, and best of luck, sir. Whoa, what a great question. Music has been with me for, well, ever since I can really remember, and many people know back there I've got my Tyros keyboard. Um, but when it comes to pop music, I grew up with soundtracks and orchestras. My sister was listening to all of the modern music. I had them both blaring in my ears for years. And I think it was when I learned to drive and got my stereo in my car that I really started to pay attention to what was going on in the charts so much, because not only did you have a radio, but you put the tapes in of recording the top 40 every week in there, and you'd go off for a drive with your mates and you'd have that music going on in the background. And because of the nature of the very charts, where it's, you know, down from 25 to 36, we've got, whatever. Um, Subconsciously, my brain's picking that up, and so a lot of songs, even if I hated them, I remember. But I suppose when it comes to now, I wouldn't know what's in the charts right now if you asked me. I do feel I've gone to daddy level when it comes to what's hip and what's not type thing. Hip and what's not. I haven't used words like that since the 60s. But I suppose when it comes to things like Britpop, Oasis, Pulp, all of that, that would be an era that I could remember everything. The dance era, the synthesizer era, the punk era, the disco era. After Britpop, very little do I recognise. And I suppose I'm like you, therefore, by saying I'd be hard pushed going beyond 1996 7 to pick up, say, 3/4 of the chart and know what every tune was. So I would be able to in 1997, but you get to 1999, 2000, 2001, and you're going into the Westlife era and boy bands and Spice Girls, and there would be stuff in there that I'd know because they were just played to death on the radio, and stuff I'd be going, who the hell are you talking about? So, yeah, you're quite right. I could probably name 80% in 1995, 70% by about 1999, 2002, 50%, 2005 onwards, next to nothing. Probably next to nothing. Yeah, and I say that with only a slight thought to that, because remember, I haven't prepped. Maybe I do. Maybe I'd surprise myself. I might test myself on that one. Thanks very much, Jampon. I hope that's a great answer for you. Salute. Then I don't think there are any more questions. Just to mention that Magda gave me an idea of what my problem might have been with my health. Thanks very much for that. Down the rabbit hole, brilliant. About he's going to look out for more of Blake 7 stuff and mention some stuff about Space 1999 and so forth. So thanks very much for those questions, guys. I did look to see whether there was one from Steve. I couldn't see one, so apologies. If you haven't written a comment, look, totally understand it. Very busy guys. Sometimes it can be you're just very busy. Sometimes it's you just can't think of anything. I'm hoping that some of the topics that my friends have said here spark something that you want to expand on next week. Could be anything. Okay, so we've got that out of the way, and we now do the watched on YouTube part of things. So what did I watch on YouTube this week? Not a great deal, to be quite honest, but I've written down some things, and you know that some of it will obviously be stuff that you've heard me say about before, because they're my normal mainstay of watching stuff on YouTube. So this week in retro, you know, I watched that on a Saturday. They did an article that the Internet Archive is being sued. That was a good, interesting article, because they mentioned, I'm surprised it hasn't been done sooner. This time they're in trouble because during lockdown they rented out books because you couldn't go to libraries. And you only got so many licenses, because when you rent out a book from somewhere like Internet Archive, you do it by the hour or the day or the week or the month. And they were apparently during lockdown and beyond exceeding their license, so they would rent out another book to somebody else when the other one hasn't been returned yet, which is a no-no. So they're being sued. So that was an interesting article. The Internet Archive has so much in there that they say is there for preservation, but it has some stuff on there that's so new it shouldn't really be there. Is one way of looking at it or expressing about it. So I'm just glad about the Internet Archive, because I visit there quite often and get some stuff when I've exhausted my other means of getting something that I need to have quickly, is what I need to say there. And then they talked about a guy that's recreated the box, the manuals and everything to do with it for a computer that he's built from scratch. So in this particular instance, we'll just say, knock it on the head now, it was a Spectrum. So he redesigned the box, redesigned the stereophone, did the manual, printed it out professionally, put the stickers that you'd get inside there, built a Spectrum from scratch, made of all new modern components, bar I think one chip that they mentioned. Slapped that into the box and you could buy it, and the whole experience meant that it cost about £400 to buy this Spectrum, and that's a heck of a lot of money when you consider you can still buy a second-hand one for about 30, 40, 50 quid. And you have to question, do you really want to go down that route and still not have a machine that was built back in the day? It's actually built yesterday. Yeah, it does make you think, and that's the reason why I like this week in retro. It makes you think a little bit. So moving on, we came to Tech Mode, which, as you know, I watch Tech Mode because he brings up things about mini discs, hi-fis, stereos, and that sort of stuff. And this time he was talking about an important subject to many, but not to the majority, which is playing back a 78 RPM record on modern equipment, which can't be done. If you think about it, the 78 record, which came out before the 33 and a third album, had a groove in it much wider and deeper than a modern LP. An LP uses a 1mm groove. I think it's 1 to 3 millimeters for a 78. So if you put a needle that needs to go into that trough, the sound that would be mostly picked up at the top part of the groove wouldn't be picked up, because the needle is going to drop down to the bottom where all you'll hear is surface static. But it's not only about the stylus, it's about the speed of the turn style, for which you can buy things like mini strobe calibration. You can even use machines that tighten the banding of the motor. There are pots. What I mean by pots is pieces of electronic components that you can turn with a Phillips screw head to speed and slow down certain motors. And it was just a lovely thing to watch, because I learned so much about this equipment, especially as I can understand it probably a little bit better because it's equipment made in the 70s and 80s. It's a little bit like my dad when he said, I couldn't work on your car. Um, and he's, this was when I bought my modern car because I worked on cars in the 70s where the engines were proper carburetors, twin carburetors, injection engine type stuff. You can't even fit a tool down the side of the engine mount these days. So, yeah, totally get it, Dad, now. Really do. Especially this week, and I'll talk about that at the end. Then, moving on, I saw Dr. Mix again. He's been doing a series of deconstructing certain songs. So I told you about last week that there was Alan Parsons track. There was before that a Jean-Michel Jarre Oxygen track. This time it was deconstructing Eiffel 65's Blue. And he goes down the point of saying, I know that is a synthesizer, that is a pad, that is a proper piano, that's using filtering, that was using a preamp. He goes to that level and recreates the song using synthesizers that he's got. And if he hasn't got the proper one, he'll use one that's similar, that can actually mimic that sound specifically. Brilliant. I love all that. You learn so much about the construction of a tune as well. So that's great. And then Playtendo Guy is a person who subscribes to my channel. And an alert came up just after I'd been doing something with MainMeister during the week. And he was doing a live talk with another person who I'm also a subscriber to, which is Euphoria Pictures. So I went there, and there were 5 people in this stream talking about films. And I haven't talked about films in a long time in a stream. They were talking about what attracted you to horror, what's the thing that causes horror to be on a downturn, why is sci-fi so confusing, what, in your opinion, has the best use of sound and music in a film ever through the whole of film history. Questions like that were coming up. And it was great. So I just have to give out a big salute to Playtendo Guy. One for subscribing to my waffle, which is nothing like yours. Mine's a ragtag hick-hock parts put together, to yours, which is concentrating on game reviews, physical media, which you get a big thumbs up. I've got thousands of films, and doing that live streaming and being sort of like the main host of that stream, and concentrating on reading the questions out to your guests. Brilliant. Did a fantastic job, mate. Thanks very much. And that's my watched on YouTube out the way. Not doing too badly. Then we get to your stuff. So what can I say? Down the rabbit hole. Been very prolific this week. He did a homebrew Atari 2600 game called I Ran, which is a bit like Bitrunner. It was an Atari 2600, you can imagine, Atari 2600 version of a guy running along, leaping or ducking under obstacles and see how far you can run, which you'd think actually is perfect for the Atari 2600. And pretty much he agreed because he thought this homebrew was pretty good. Obviously a memory game. But he loved it to bits, and I liked him playing it. It's one I haven't picked up yet for my own machine I've got here where I download homebrew stuff, but I will get round to doing that, and it's written down and it's in my blog, so I'm bound sure to remember now. And then he was showing off something that he bought for his PS5 called Arcade Paradise, which looked very much like something similar that I've seen on Steam. It's where you are a manager of an arcade place. You turn buildings that were laundrettes into arcade places. Then you buy the arcade machines into the premise that you've got. You can play these arcade games as well as managing the whole of the store. And he wanted to show that off and show off some of the games that are in there. And it looked very interesting. I don't know the price of it. I believe MainMeister has got something similar. He showed off his arcade place of home in a virtual world, and showed you that you could play Outrun and so forth in that environment. And I think when I've looked into it, I thought the price was a little bit too expensive, and I kept meaning I'd look back at it when the sales are on, and I keep forgetting. So note to myself, I've got a pen here, write it down. I need to look into that and see if I get some enjoyment, because I used to love management games like Theme Park and Tycoon games. So I've written it down to look into that, possibly over this Easter weekend. Thanks very much for that, down the rabbit hole. So Ray C, I mentioned him. He's quite new to me, but I've been watching his long plays, and he did a long play of Blagger Goes to Hollywood. Now, why did I watch that? Because Blagger Goes to Hollywood is one of those games that I throw into conversations when people are playing random games in their streams as a tongue-in-cheek. Don't ever play Blagger Goes to Hollywood. It's bloody awful, and it is, as far as I'm concerned, bloody awful. But salute to the guy, because he went through it, found out every object you needed for each of the rooms and how you complete it, and of course therefore you got to listen to all of the tunes that are in that game, and they're all movie tunes. So that's why it's called Blagger Goes to Hollywood. There's a game I still look at it and go, no, keep that away from me. Horrible. Sorry. But for a thing to watch, go and watch this after this blog. Brilliant gameplay skills. And nice to reminisce over some of the tunes. There's some in there, Kojak, Incredible Hulk, all sorts inside that game, which will spark a memory for you. So that's great. Robert's Retro Gaming, been watching him as I always do with his Atari games that he likes to play, plus Minecraft. So he played Ambulance on the 8-bit Atari, Perilous Journey on the 8-bit Atari, King of Boxer as an arcade piece, because he's part of the high score kerfuffle, which I believe has ended now, but because of the way that Robert uploads his stuff, sometimes games will appear later than the actual event was going on, because if you remember rightly, I mentioned King of Boxer 2 weeks ago when Ponder was playing it, and he did a Minecraft as well. So I've been thoroughly entertained by Robert. I've put some comments to him in regards to King of Boxer, not that it will make much of a difference now, but it's still fun to nice to interact with an old mate that I interacted with a lot earlier, a lot more in my earlier blogs. Steve's Gaming, he continues his Steve Plays series, where he asks friends to name 5 games, and then he'll play them for you and see how far he can get. He did Vinicity this week and Panther UK's set of 5 games. The funniest one there, I think, being Panthers, seeing so many deaths for the games that he chose. And then, of course, good old Steve needs to sit back and relax a little bit, and he wanted to indulge himself because he's getting very close now to being, well, he didn't write down what his age is, right? But I'm pretty sure it's something like 75. Is that right, Steve? Taking the piss out of you now, you miserable old devil. From the old gits. So he indulged himself by playing some games that he just wanted you guys to watch. I've done that in the past, but done it as a stream. But he did it as a video. Fair play to him. Played some games. And I even now know what his mother's favourite game is. And that surprised me. I got that totally wrong. I thought it would be this, which is a certain game that was in my head. It turned out to be something totally different. So definitely worth a watch. Ponder did some stuff this week. My God, his output came out this week. He did a lovely unboxing, fitting and testing of a piece of equipment called a Pi Storm 32 Lite, which is like an accelerator board with a Pi strapped onto it for the Amiga, which pushes your Amiga to such speeds that you just wouldn't be able to do that in the modern day. I think his final test was that it was 46 times faster than the top end Amiga 4000 would have been on real hardware back in the day. So you can imagine the first thing you want to know when you've got a piece of equipment like that is just how fast this can go. So you do some bench testing, right? And the figures don't really do it justice, because you're going, oh, so it's 46% faster. It's just a number on the screen. It's not showing anything. So he decided to go back to his catalogue, and he loaded up Frontier, which is, to anybody else, that's Elite 2. And as we all know what Elite is, the Amiga version did its best, bless its little heart, but it never had the graphic finesse and processing power to push that game. But with this lovely piece of kit installed in his Amiga 1200, Frontier now moves like butter. Do you see what I mean? And he showed off as well a little demo called We Come in Peace, which back in the day would have impressed me, Colin, but I don't really get that impressed with playing a video back or sound back. And even when it comes to the 3D graphics, if they were rendered in real time, they're of that old style, non-textured type, which I know is impressive, and I found it impressive, and other people will find impressive, but it's very much the sort of thing I used to do with my Amiga 1000. When my Amiga 1000 came out, I bought public domain library games, and they would be full of people rendering the Starship Enterprise coming out of dry dock, or the Enterprise zooming into warp with a digital loop sound in it. So I suppose I've moved away a little bit, so that demo didn't impress me as much as I hoped it would, but it was still impressive. And then just a little bit of product placement. We get to 20th Century Gaming, who've done some live streams this week, which were great, but more importantly, he did some live streams that he didn't really advertise that I was able to come in and see, where he's practicing his skills in a game called Thrust, because he's going for a high score. And I wish him all the best with that, because tell you what, I couldn't do high score stuff. Anybody who's seen my 8-bit years know I just about get through. So now we're getting to the end now, and I don't think we're doing too badly. What I've watched on TV. So I'm immensely enjoying Picard. We're at season 3, episode 8 now. So there are only 2 episodes to go, 9 and 10. And I have to say, it's not disappointed me one bit. I thought it was going to be a big board of just bringing back old characters for the shock value of it all. But each one of these characters has got something that I've wanted to see for a long time, in a story that's very, very dark. Very dark. It's a very dark story. And it's absolutely fantastic. In fact, I'd love to have done thinking about it now before starting this blog off, I'd have liked to have done a bit more and shown you probably a clip of next week's episode or something. But I encourage you to watch it. I know there are some people out there that are tentative not to, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because it's not like Picard Season 1, it's not like Picard Season 2, and it's very much like Star Trek's First Contact and The Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2. If you were to put those together into a 10-part TV series, it would be like that. Very dark, very story-driven, very character-driven, and fan service from seeing shock value things being brought in, but not shock for the sake of it. It's because the story demands it. That's the important aspect of that. Then there's Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 6, which, to be quite honest, The Mandalorian this season is disappointing me. I'm going to say it now. I've liked it. I've enjoyed it. There are stories that were in there that I thought were pretty good. but I'm starting to wane, I have to say. This week's episode was just it didn't even need to be there. I'm pretty sure if you're looking at things from a story arc. I might be wrong because we're only 6 episodes in, but from what I could see, that story didn't even need to be there. Didn't do anything other than right at the end it gave something that probably has a bearing if there are more seasons to come. But that's loose. And then I've just been watching films this week. So I watched Archive. Now, I've mentioned this film before. I'm going to show you the cover when I show you my stuff that I've bought this week. But I highly encourage you to watch Archive. I think it was like blog 6, 7, somewhere that far back. And we're at, what, blog 50? Oh, I've forgotten. 58? 59. There you go. So it's months and months and months back. I'm going to show you the trailer, and then I'm going to ask you to make your own minds up on whether you'd like to see it, because I think it's wonderful. Even if you can find it and get it, do so. I'm currently looking for a 4K version now because I've had my Blu-ray DVD Duo Digibook for a long time now. But I really encourage you to watch that. And then we come to my stuff. So what have I done? Well, you know, I did a blog last week. I've done 2 8-bit years, which were immense fun for me to do because I had time on Thursday and I wanted to sit down and play games because I'd finished work on Wednesday and it was a hard slog on Wednesday. And I decided, no, let's do the prep work for 2 8-bit years. And I got so far into it that I thought all I've got to do now is play the games and I could get them out. So on Friday I did just that. Instead of releasing one and then I'm one ahead for next week, I thought, no, give them an Easter present. Put both out there. One was a Vic-20 game called K-Star Patrol, one was Forbidden Forest. Both have meaning to me. Both great games. One, a hidden gem for an older system. And I'll leave it there with that. And then I've just written at the end topics that I could cover. Easter, what do you do? Well, I mentioned that at the beginning. And it really would be nice to know, sort of like, are you relaxing? Do you have a roast dinner? Is that your tradition? Do you spend time with the kids doing egg hunts? Do you just veg out and watch box sets from Netflix? Anything. Whatever sparks your mind on that one. And then to just touch upon something that irritated me, and it's still irritating me now, is that I had to take my mother down to get her hair done on Friday because it was Good Friday and the buses weren't running. And a message came up on my screen and it reminded me of something that I wanted to talk about for ages, which is VAG units and your car. Because a message came up on the screen saying, auto start stop system failure, unable to start this feature, turn ignition off. Right? And I know what that is. I've got a diesel car and it's got an auto start stop which is supposed to help the environment. Okay? But there are a couple of reasons why the start stop system doesn't work. But I'd forgotten all about that. So I got this out, which is what they call an OBD11. It's a VAG unit. It's a little sort of Bluetooth tool that talks to the computer, and you put an app on your phone and you can see whether there are any errors. They're quite cheap. There's lots of them on the market. OBD11 is probably considered the one that most people will go to because it's the mid-priced one, and is very useful. Okay, put it in and it found 4 faults. 4 faults on my car. I've had my car just MOT'd. The last service was last year, and I've done literally 400 miles in the car because of sickness in the last year, and there were faults on the car. You'd think they'd have been cleared the last time I had a service, and I haven't done enough miles for anything. So I looked at what the faults were, and some of them were intermittent tyre pressure sensor on off, that sort of stuff. So you hold the button down and it clears the codes. And it left 2 codes behind. One of them for the braking system and one of them for the gateway system. Now the gateway system, if anybody knows, there is a gateway in your computer where every bit of your sensors talk to each other. And the gateway had an error that said no settings set, which when you look at it, it turned around and said minor issue. What it is when you took your car to be serviced last time, they didn't update the software, so the settings are not set for your dashboard. And that, I believe, is stopping the sensors on the wheels working, because that one was a unrecoverable message from sensor, which I couldn't clear. The good news is that there were 2 other faults, and before I cleared them, one of them was the auto start stop. Now, looking into this problem, apparently cars are very much like computers. If you've ever phoned up a service centre for your computer and they said, have you ever turned it off and on? Right? You can't really turn a car off and on, but you can. All you have to do is basically take the terminal off the battery. The whole car shuts down, right? Apart from some very, very clever things that require a lithium battery to keep powered up. Okay, so on my battery terminal there's a little USB clip that you can just pull off, and when you push it back on and turn the ignition on, your dashboard lights up like a Christmas tree. Okay, and of course it does that because you've just cleared the memory of your car, and the settings like throttle width and jet angle and all sorts of stuff won't be filled with data until you travel down the road. So what I did was I took a snapshot of with my VAG unit on this Christmas tree light lit dashboard, and then I travelled down the road. Every single one of those errors disappeared, and then when I drove up and switched the ignition off and left it for 30 minutes and switched it back on, I put the VAG unit in. All I've got was the 2 initial errors, which is that data bus and that braking system gobbledygook message that can't be reset because it can't get through the gateway. So I'm very happy because I've learned something. If you are having problems, which some things are just old memory codes for when your tyre sensor wasn't picking up the right readings for the pressure inside your tyres at the time, which stay in memory because of that battery, you can now just unhook the line that takes you to the battery to record that, put it back on, clears memory, and then of course all of those settings will fill again with the throttle and so forth, all filling in. Absolutely wonderful. Learned something, and apparently that is well documented on YouTube, and I missed it all. And with that, I need to go through what I bought and then just some nice little bits at the end. So I mentioned that archive, so I'll tell you what, let's do this on the other cam, because we haven't come to this cam for a long time. Yay! Hello. So here we go with archive. Now I bought this in Germany because it was the only way that I could get the Blu-ray DVD combo. It's like a digibook. But I'm going to show you the trailer to that, make your own mind up. But it's a very much like a Bruce Willis film without giving too much away. Then I bought this on the cheap because apparently it panned in the cinema. Okay, and it was a steel book, and the steel book looked lovely, and it was half price. And it was Babylon. Okay, then it was a film that came out at Christmas and did not make its money. And it's got an award-winning director, a cast to die for. I mean, it's got Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Lee Jun Lee, yep, I know that one. Diego Calva, yep, I know that one. Killer cast. Set in an era about filmmaking and extravagance and parties, and yet made no money. We don't know if it was because of marketing or whatever, but I think it's made its money now, but it took a damn long time. The estimate was it was only going to take 3 weeks in the pictures to actually get its money back. And then, of course, this should probably put the end, I think, for quite a few months now, me talking Star Trek. Because I think you've seen me playing trailers of Star Trek, talking about Star Trek, the repetition of how many times I've watched it and all that sort of stuff. This came out this week, which is the last of the 4K remasters of the movies. This time they'll be in the next generation film. So there's 4 of these in here. This has got the Blu-rays and the 4K releases, non-steel book, okay, inside them. So I've put a couple of trailers that I'm going to show you at the end in, but that's because these are absolutely gorgeous in 4K, and the next generation, and I think probably the hardest thing to do, because the original Star Trek crew had 6 films, and William Shatner ended up being in a handover period for the next generation film, so it was in the 7th film, and then there were only, if you count them all up, 4 next generation films, and yet it lasted longer than the television series. So I think we have to look at that and go, that's a shame, because it's a missed opportunity. But if you do watch the last 2 films in that series that makes the Star Trek films 10 films, they were pretty weak. I didn't like the stories. The special effects were fine, the characters were fine. The stories, yeah, after First Contact, Nemesis and Insurrection, not my favourites. No, they never were dipped below mediocre, but not really my type of thing. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to totally shut up. Going to play some trailers for you like I do, hopefully with no knock-ons in regards to copyright infringements. I will get those, but hopefully nothing where it must be removed. Other than that, I'll be back on the other side in a moment. So I'm going to shut up and show you the media view.
I think what we have here in Hollywood is high art. It's
Party time! Sparkle time! If you could go anywhere in the whole world, where would you go?
I always want to be part of something bigger.
Yes!
Let's go! Something that lasts, that means something. You know, when I first moved to LA,
I got your face tattooed on my back.
you know what the signs on all the doors read? No actors or dogs allowed. I changed that. Morning!
Good job for you.
I'll do anything.
That's the cocksucker they sent to screw us.
Bitch is stealing the scene right from under me. She's icing her nipples so they perk up through her dress. I ain't icing my nipples. This is natural. Where do you say we come in for my close-up now?
What are your thoughts for the future?
Shouldn't stand in the way of progress.
This is gonna be what it's gonna be.
Here's the twist.
Whoa!
The girl seems nice.
She is. She has no idea what's next.
There's a new sensibility now. People care about morals.
I've never done nothing except disappoint people my whole life. But I made it on my terms, not theirs. We are gonna be more than they ever bargained for.
What I do means something.
It's bigger than you.
And I'm going to bed.
In a distant corner of our galaxy, a secret observatory is attacked. A brilliant scientist is found, and a mysterious ribbon of energy where past and future collide is unleashed.
It's a doorway that we call the Nexus.
Every ship which has approached the ribbon has either been destroyed or severely damaged.
Obviously, they were looking for something. There's still no indication of why they attacked the station.
I must return to the observatory immediately.
There's nothing I can do.
Timing is very important in my experiment.
The hell's he doing?
I have an appointment with Eternity, and I don't want to be late.
Someone doesn't care about weapons or power. He just cares about getting back to the Nexus.
The star is going to collapse in a matter of minutes.
That'll destroy everything in this system.
Population?
230 million, sir.
Why would he destroy a star? I have to stop him. But I can't do this alone. I need help.
I know someone who can.
You say history considers me dead. Who am I to argue with history?
You're a Starfleet officer. You have a duty.
I don't need to be lectured by you. I was out saving the galaxy when your grandfather was in diapers.
Now, the torch of adventure is about to be passed.
Eliminate them.
Klingon vessel decloaking directly ahead, sir.
Target their bridge!
Full disruptors!
Let's go! Bridge, we have a new problem! All right, let's move them out. Let's go. Take them out.
10 seconds to warp core breach.
All hands, brace for impact!
Let's try and cheat death together.
Warp 1, engage!
Star Trek Generations. In his nightmares, he can see them. In his mind, he can hear them.
Locutus.
In his soul, he can feel them.
I've just received a report from Deep Space 5. Long-range sensors have picked up...
Yes, I know. The Borg. Set a course for Earth. Maximum warp.
Now, in Earth's darkest hour, he must fight them again.
Captain, Earth.
Life signs? Population approximately 9 billion. All Borg.
How?
Time travel.
They went back and assimilated Earth. Changed history. I must follow them back. Repair whatever damage they've done.
But this time, they must travel to the past.
April 4th, 2063.
To save our future.
You're all astronauts on some kind of Star Trek. They invade our space, and we fall back. They assimilate entire worlds, and we fall back. Not again. The line must be drawn here.
It looks like the control deck's 26 up to 11.
Mr. Data and I are returning to the ship. Don't let them touch you!
Captain!
Data!
We must activate the auto-destruct sequence.
You want to destroy the ship and run away. You coward.
If you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand.
Let's rock and roll!
Destroy them. Watch your futures end.
Our shields and our weapons are gone.
Resistance is futile.
Perhaps today is a good day to die.
Don't look, blow up the damn ship!
No! We are not going to lose the Enterprise. Not to the Borg, not while I'm in command.
Star Trek First Contact.
How's my man? All work, no play, huh? I really hope you're happy there.
I'm missing you. A bit. A lot.
I'm working on something.
To bring you back.
They've never managed to connect a computer to the archive before.
I waited a long time.
And then I saw something. It was you.
We had a visit from the archive company.
The subject is Almore Julie Alice. Term time so far, 2 years, 8 months, 4 days.
She's not ready to go yet.
Of course.
They think your robots might be based around their technology.
We are obliged to act with force, if necessary.
You made another like me.
I'm not replacing you.
But you did it. What was she like?
She was perfect.
I want to go home.
This is home. Jules, can you hear me? Do not let her outside under any circumstances.
You don't want to be trapped in a box dead. Just come.
I have to try and get her back.
I am shutting you down immediately.
What do they want?
They want you.
Yours was the face I saw above my cradle. The only mother I've ever known.
But my feet are set upon a road that I must follow.
From director Cecil B. DeMille.
I will teach thee.
Man shall be ruled by law, not by the will of other men.
Slaves are mine.
The Academy Award-winning film.
Let my people go.
Of the unforgettable definitive Bible story.
I know not his God, neither will I let his people go.
You have not obeyed the Lord.
This night, the Lord our God will deliver us from the bondage of Egypt.
They shall die under my chariot wheels. So let it be written. So let it be done.
Starring some of film's greatest legends. The greatest epic of all time.
Behold his mighty hand. Those who will not live by the law shall die by the law.
The Ten Commandments. Now on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray and digital.
Yes. So I threw that last one in because it's Easter, and I'm sure there are plenty of other Easter films that you could be watching, like The Life of Brian, just to name one. My mum always considers, when she watches these, she said, "Oh, yeah, that's the Bible and other fables, isn't it?" Yeah, fables being the the bit about it, because my mother's much the same. After her husband died, my dad, so she's questioned an awful lot of things. And I threw in Archive, because I think that's a film that, after watching it for a second time, after a year and a half, I much as liked it as I did the first time I watched it. And I think it's a film that most people don't know. And before I forget, and this is where we end the blog, which is a longer one this week, hope you enjoyed it. Mainmeister phoned me up and basically asked me a question. It's why you heard me mention him in the shout-outs. And I forgot to do his question because I had to write it down. It wasn't in the comments. He asked me quite a pertinent question, and a loaded one. What console and computer was a complete flop and short-lived, which with funding and marketing would have been a good platform? So you can imagine, you've got to go back to all the early days, all the way up to now. Name one computer and one console that flopped, and there have been many, or considered flopped, that if they'd have given it some more marketing and more money, and that money could be used for development, by the way, would have succeeded. And even now I'm struggling. But I think from the computer point of view, I think the Coleco Adam, which was very short-lived, with more research and more money, could have been a surprise hit. Because if you think about it, the ColecoVision console, which had some computing add-ons that made it something good, I think the computer version could have been incredible. But the trouble with it was that it was unreliable. It basically failed. I mean, you bought it in a shocking state. And I think it came out for literally a year and a half. I think it came out at the end of '83, and by a year and a half it was dead. And I don't think it sold. I don't think it would have sold more than 25,000 units. I'd have to check all my figures. But such a small base, such a product that could have done incredibly well. I think that's a good choice of a computer that had such a sad ending. When it comes to consoles, oh my god, it's a minefield, because some will consider them hits and some will consider them fails, which means that you really need to have honorary mentions. So a definite fail was the Commodore 64, but the question, because it had a G64 console, but the question is, if it had got more money, if there had been more marketing, could it have been a good platform? The Commodore 64 would have been an incredibly good game console if it had been brought out in 1986. The G64 could have been an incredible console at the year it came out if they'd have given more to it, if it wasn't just a 64 with the keyboard removed. If you'd have put the Commodore 128 or even the Mega 65 components into that, because remember, the Mega 65 never came out and it was the replacement to the Commodore 64. So if you'd have turned that chip that makes up the Mega 65 into a console, that would have worked. The Saturn, now most people don't consider that a failure. Some do consider it a failure. But the problem with the Saturn is not that it was a failure for itself. It was a failure because of its time. If you think about it, the Saturn came out and already 3/4 of the way through was the development of the Dreamcast. So it had a problem as soon as it came out, in the fact it had very little software and a machine on its heels that was going to replace it before you'd even got a year out of the sales market of it being on the market. So I believe the Saturn failed really, though, because it was from a programming point of view, you were in development hell. The hardware was very hard to write for, not many tools to write for it. Now, I mentioned honorary mentions for 3DO and CDI, and the reason for that is there's nothing really wrong with those machines, but nobody knew what to do with multimedia. They came out at a time where nobody knew what to do with it. So you had bad FMV, low quality video, and basically you might as well have had a video CD player, because you were just watching movies and listening to sound. There was the interaction part of it was really just a jog shuttle on the actual disc itself, where you just span to chapter 25 to play this sequence because you chose this answer at chapter 3. It's that sort of thing. They just didn't know what to do with it, and if they didn't know what to do with it, they ported across a game that loaded in its entirety and gave you CD tracks of the music. Very, very difficult period of time. And the PC Engine I mentioned as an honorary as well, or the TurboGrafx 16, because it never got a distributor. That's the problem. It did amazingly well in the country it was brought into. It had minor success in America because it had a distributor. For the rest of the world, no distributor. So how can you have a machine that's ever going to succeed unless you have a distributor and some marketing in its place? So I put down as an honorary mention the PC Engine, because throwing more money into marketing into as having a distributor would have made that, I believe, a console that would have succeeded based on its year and its technology. So which is the console that I'm going to talk about that I think with more money, development and marketing would have done better, and that's the Atari Jaguar. And it's such a sad thing to say, because other than the Atari ST, the years between that going back to the Atari 800, there is virtually nothing in between. They made some arcade games, but when it comes to the home market, nothing innovative. The Atari ST wasn't a fluke, it's just that even that was rushed to market without having a proper sound chip. And after the Jaguar, what is there? And it's such a shame, because that ends a little bit like the Sega story with the Saturn and the Dreamcast. I believe that console was around for 3 years, and in 3 years it sold 150,000 units worldwide. That's a very, very small number. So no wonder it's got a software catalogue as small as it has, because it was virtually taken off of the shelves a year or so into its release. Europe didn't get the Jaguar until 14 months after the American release. So it was virtually dead in the water being released in this country. In fact, that was just to get rid of the surplus, I think, of the units. Shame. And with that, I hope that was a good answer for you, Mainmeister. Sorry it wasn't put into the question segment, but I'm going to give you all your time back now for Easter. I really do wish you happy Easter, whatever you're doing. Forget the religious overtones of it. Be with your family, watch some great films, play some games, do some things for yourself, but also think about some of those things that you could be doing, like mowing the lawn, just like I've got to. And with that, salute, thank you very much. Till the next time, bye-bye.